The Mont Blanc pen felt heavier than usual in my jacket pocket as I approached the executive conference room that Tuesday morning. 25 years at Vera Industries had taught me that respect was earned through consistency, not grand gestures. I'd arrived early to welcome Adrian Mercer, our new CEO, the way I'd been welcomed a quarter-century ago, with a firm handshake and genuine support. But the moment I stepped inside, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Adrian didn't extend his hand. He didn't acknowledge my greeting. Instead, he adjusted his Italian silk tie and delivered words that cut through the mahogany-paneled room like a blade. "Sebastian Ward, your time here is finished. Stop for a moment. How are you today? I hope you're feeling well. Take a moment, pour yourself a warm glass of whiskey, and stay with me until the end of this story. Thank you for always supporting us. Now let me take you inside the moment that changed everything." The words didn't register immediately. Around the polished table, two recently promoted vice presidents sat rigid, their tablets glowing, waiting for my response. I studied Adrian's face, searching for any hint this was some misguided attempt at corporate humor. There was none. He slid a manila envelope across the table with surgical precision, his eyes already dismissing me. This company requires modern thinking, not legacy dead weight. 25 years collapsed into that single brutal moment. Midnight crisis calls, supply chain disasters averted, audits passed under impossible deadlines, all reduced to legacy deadweight by a man who'd been on the job for exactly 3 weeks. The humiliation deepened as Adrian leaned forward, ensuring his voice carried to every corner of the room. "Gentlemen," he announced, tapping the envelope with his manicured finger, "this represents the beginning of our transformation. Vera Industries must shed its dinosaur thinking to survive, and Sebastian's departure signals our commitment to progress." Gasps rippled through the silence. I felt every eye on me, not with the respect earned over 2 decades, but with the awkward pity reserved for public executions. Some executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, others stared at their tablets as if the screens could provide escape from witnessing this institutional cruelty. My hand instinctively moved to the Mont Blanc in my pocket, the pen Raymond Coyle had given me on my 20th anniversary. Its weight grounded me against the tsunami of indignation threatening to break. Adrian straightened, satisfied with his performance. He had no idea this scene would be remembered not as his triumph, but as the spark that would ignite his downfall. 2 days before the humiliation, my phone had buzzed during a quiet Sunday evening. I'd been nursing a glass of Macallan 18, trying to lose myself in Isaacson's biography of Jobs' Anything to quiet the unease that came with rumors of corporate restructuring. The name on the screen made me set down both book and glass, Raymond Coyle. Raymond wasn't just Vera's founder, he was the company incarnate. Though he'd stepped back from daily operations years earlier, exhausted by endless battles with activist investors, his presence still permeated every decision, every crisis, every moment that mattered. When Raymond Coyle called, you answered, "Sebastian." His voice carried the same gravitas I remembered from the crisis years, when he seemed to see 10 moves ahead of everyone else. "We need to talk tonight." Within the hour, I sat across from him in the leather armchair of his private study at the Union Club. The scent of aged whiskey and tobacco hung in the air like incense. Raymond occupied his usual chair behind the mahogany desk, a stack of legal documents arranged with military precision. His eyes, though weathered by decades of corporate warfare, still burned with the intensity that had built an empire. "I've made a decision about this company's future," he said, pushing the documents toward me. "It's time to ensure Vera's legacy remains in the hands of someone who understands what we've built." I leaned forward, uncertain where this was heading. "I'm transferring my remaining shares 42% to you." The words hit like a physical blow. I'd spent my entire career fighting to keep this company afloat, never imagining I could own even a fraction of it. My pulse quickened equal parts terror and exhilaration. Raymond reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a silver Mont Blanc pen, handling it with the reverence reserved for family heirlooms. "This pen signed Vera's founding documents 30 years ago," he said, placing it in my palm. "It's more than ink and metal, Sebastian. It's a covenant of trust." The weight was substantial, reassuring. "If you sign these papers, you're not just an employee anymore. You're the guardian of everything this company represents." I stared at the pen, its sterling silver surface reflecting the desk lamp's glow. "Why me?" Raymond's expression hardened. "Because I've watched the board circle like vultures. I know who bleeds Vera blue and who sees only quarterly profit margins. You've sacrificed more than anyone should have to spend Christmas morning directing crisis operations while your family opened presents without you. And I'll never forget when your father passed. You stayed in the command center managing the Singapore shipping crisis instead of attending his funeral." My throat tightened. The memory still cut deep standing in the war room surrounded by maps and shipping manifests, coordinating emergency logistics while my father was laid to rest. I'd convinced myself that saving the company justified missing the most important goodbye of my life. The guilt had carved itself permanently into my character. That kind of sacrifice doesn't have a price tag, Raymond continued, but it deserves recognition. Hope bloomed in places I'd kept locked down for years. As I signed my name, the silver pen gliding across legal papers that would reshape everything, Raymond's voice dropped to a whisper. We keep this quiet for now. I want to see who reveals their true colors when they believe you have no power. Arrogance exposes itself, Sebastian. And when it does, you won't just defend yourself, you'll decide this company's future. 2 days later, Adrian Mercer would walk into Vera believing he held all the cards. He had no idea that a signature in silver ink had already checkmate his game. The morning after Adrian's announcement, I returned to my office carrying a banker's box instead of my usual briefcase. The walk down the executive corridor felt longer than usual, weighted with the silence that follows public humiliation. Conversations stopped when I passed, not from malice, but from the uncomfortable awareness that they were witnessing an institutional injustice. Inside my office, morning light filtered through half-closed blinds, casting familiar shadows across the desk where I'd spent most of my adult life. I set the box down and began gathering the artifacts of a quarter century, framed photos from groundbreaking ceremonies, binders from crisis operations, the coffee mug chipped on one side but treasured because it had survived every midnight emergency. Through the glass walls, I caught glimpses of colleagues. Some looked away quickly, others didn't bother hiding their dismay. I recognized that expression pity mixed with helplessness, the same look I'd seen on dock workers when shipments got tied up in red tape, knowing no amount of effort could break bureaucratic paralysis. As I folded the suit jacket that had hung on my chair's back for years, memories pressed in like physical weight. Sleeping upright in airport terminals while negotiating with customs officials, dawn calls to reroute supply chains after labor strikes. And the memory that still ached most, choosing the company over my father's final goodbye, directing emergency logistics like a general at war while my family grieved without me. I never forgave myself for that choice, but I wore it quietly, a scar invisible to everyone but me. Now, looking at the faces beyond my office walls, I wondered if anyone truly understood the cost. Corporate boards could erase decades with a single memo, but the sacrifices carved into a man's character were permanent. There was pride in that thought. My name might not be on the building, but its foundation was built with pieces of my life. I slid the last folder into the box and paused. My phone buzzed, a text from Harrison Mitchell, my oldest ally in supply chain operations, a man who'd weathered every storm at my side. His message was simple. The old guard doesn't forget, Sebastian. Not now, not ever. Quiet pride swelled, dulling the sting of public humiliation. I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I was leaving with the knowledge that sacrifice had been witnessed, remembered, and respected by those who mattered most. By Thursday morning, Vera's executive floors echoed with Adrian's new rhythm, colder, sharper, more efficient. I wasn't in the senior leadership meeting, but word travels fast through corporate corridors, especially when the new king is making examples. I heard from Harrison Mitchell that Adrian had strutted into the executive conference room like he owned not just the company, but every soul around that glass table. No pleasantries, no acknowledgement of institutional knowledge. Just surgical arrogance. Gentlemen, he'd begun, pacing like a predator, voice cutting through any residual loyalty. We're no longer operating under the illusion of sentimentality. This company has carried dead weight long enough. Dead weight. The phrase hit like a physical blow when Harrison relayed it. 25 years of service reduced to industrial waste in Adrian's shiny new blueprint. But Adrian hadn't stopped there. He'd pressed his advantage, voice swelling with the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. We're cutting deeper, he'd announced. Departments bloated with legacy thinking will be streamlined. Operations, supply chain, risk management, they'll be rebuilt from scratch. Dinosaurs like Sebastian Ward were anchors dragging us toward irrelevance. His departure will be our statement out with institutional dead weight, in with innovation. His words were designed to intimidate, but they accomplished something else entirely. They revealed the depth of his contempt for everything we'd built. Then fate handed me an unexpected gift. That afternoon, my phone chimed with a message from Bryson Walsh, a junior analyst I'd mentored 3 years earlier. He'd been in the meeting, tablet recording everything for comprehensive meeting minutes. The attached audio file came with a simple note. Mr. Ward, you taught me that integrity matters more than politics. They shouldn't be allowed to rewrite history. I pressed play. Adrian's voice filled my apartment, dripping with institutional contempt. Legacy thinkers like Sebastian Ward were anchors dragging us toward irrelevance. We'll make his departure our statement of intent out with the old guard, in with transformation. These dinosaurs had their time, and that time is over. The recording was crystal clear, damning, impossible to spin as anything but corporate character assassination. My grip tightened around the phone. Anger coursed through me, but alongside it came something colder, more focused. This wasn't just humiliation anymore. It was ammunition. Adrian had armed me with his own words, and words I'd learned over 25 years echo far longer than quarterly earnings reports. For the first time since my dismissal, I allowed myself a thin smile. He thought he'd silenced the old guard. Instead, he'd handed us the very weapon that would restore institutional honor. Friday morning arrived heavy with anticipation. The board of directors assembled in the executive conference suite, a room designed to intimidate, with its polished mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city skyline, and leather chairs arranged in perfect symmetry. At the far end of that imposing table sat an empty chair, unlike the others. A brass nameplate rested before it, engraved with simple authority. Reserved. Majority shareholder. The sight drew subtle glances. Some directors sipped a coffee while stealing looks at the empty seat. Others leaned into whispered speculation. The title carried institutional weight. A majority shareholder could reshape every vote, alter the company's trajectory with a single decision. Yet the chair remained empty. Adrian Mercer, commanding the head of the table, noticed those glances but chose to weave them into his narrative. With practiced confidence, he tapped his presentation notes and addressed the room smoothly. You'll be pleased to know our new investor aligns completely with my transformation vision. Their absence today is purely procedural. Consider it silent endorsement of the restructuring we're implementing. The words were calculated to reassure, but unease lingered like smoke. Directors exchanged measured looks, balancing skepticism with corporate caution. While major investors often operated from behind the scenes, the deliberate reservation of a chair with formal nameplate suggested someone who intended to claim it. I waited in the corridor beyond the frosted glass doors, my hand brushing the Mont Blanc in my jacket pocket. The pen's weight grounded me, reminding me of the covenant I'd signed 2 nights earlier in Raymond's study. My dismissal still burned, but beyond that glass lay something larger than personal vindication. This was about institutional integrity versus quarterly opportunism. I breathed deeply, steadying myself. Suppression was essential. I had to resist the urge to burst through those doors and strip away Adrian's arrogance with brutal honesty. Timing mattered more than emotion. Impact trumped impulse. Inside, Adrian continued his presentation, gesturing at slides filled with efficiency metrics and cost projections. His voice carried the certainty of a man who believed himself untouchable. This company will no longer cling to legacy methodologies, he declared. We're moving toward lean operations, aggressive timelines, measurable outcomes. But even as he spoke, one director leaned toward another, voice barely audible yet cutting through the corporate theater. Who exactly is supposed to occupy that chair? The question hung in the air, unanswered but weighted with institutional significance. Anticipation swelled. No one in that room could have known that the silence beyond the glass doors was mine, and that when I chose to enter, everything they believed about power would change. Inside the boardroom, the rhythm of agreement grew stronger. Adrian's voice carried the easy confidence of a man who believed the hardest battle was behind him. He commanded the head of the table, pacing with predatory grace as if every director already belonged to his vision. Progress demands courage, he declared, gesturing toward slides projecting aggressive growth targets. We've already initiated the process of structural optimization. With your unanimous support today, we make it official. Together, we're architecting Vera's future. Directors leaned back in their chairs, nodding with cautious compliance. One, then another, voiced support. Adrian's vision is exactly what we need. Efficiency is our only path forward. Legacy thinking has held us back too long. Relief washed across Adrian's features. The tension in his shoulders dissolved, his stride becoming almost triumphant. For the first time that morning, he allowed himself the smile of a man who believed victory was inevitable. From the corridor, I watched silhouettes shift through the frosted glass, their body language telling the story clearly enough. Adrian had swayed them. My chest tightened as seconds felt like sand slipping through an hourglass. Maybe I was too late, I thought. Maybe signing Raymond's papers with trembling hands had been nothing more than a symbolic gesture. Perhaps the company was already lost to Adrian's ambition and the board's willingness to follow the loudest voice in the room. Maybe the recording, the ownership papers, the silver pen, maybe it was all just theater against inevitable corporate reality. My fingers clenched the Mont Blanc, its edges pressing into my palm. Doubt pressed against my ribs like physical weight. I imagined directors raising their hands in unanimous agreement, Adrian collecting the votes he needed, the legacy I'd fought to protect sealed under his reckless leadership. Inside, Adrian leaned forward, voice rich with satisfaction. "Let's proceed with the vote," he said confidently. A show of hands for the restructuring proposal. But before the first hand could rise, the secretary burst through the doors, breathless, holding her tablet aloft like a herald carrying news of war. "Sir, you need to see this immediately," she announced, her voice cracking the corporate calm like lightning. Confusion rippled through the room. Devices illuminated as directors reached for phones and tablets, the blue glow reflecting off their faces as they read in unison. Adrian frowned, irritation flashing across his features at the interruption. Then his expression collapsed as he read the notification appearing on every screen. Ownership transfer notification. Effective. Tuesday, Sebastian Ward holds 42% voting shares in Vera Industries. This supersedes all previous ownership records. Board acknowledgement of majority shareholder status required immediately. Silence descended like a physical presence. Chairs creaked as directors shifted, eyes widening, scanning the words repeatedly as if disbelief could alter reality. Adrian's confidence evaporated instantly, replaced by the pale rigidity of a man whose foundation had shifted beneath him. In the corridor, I exhaled. The weight of doubt lifted just enough to let something else through resolve tempered by 25 years of institutional loyalty. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. The silence in the boardroom was suffocating when I finally pushed through the frosted glass doors. They swung wide with institutional authority, and every head turned as my footsteps struck the polished marble with measured precision. I didn't rush. I walked with the steady rhythm of a man returning home, though not a single person in that room had expected to see me cross that threshold again. In my right hand, the Mont Blanc caught the overhead lights, its sterling silver surface gleaming like a blade drawn for honorable combat. I let it rest naturally at my side, not brandished as a weapon, but carried with the quiet authority of someone who understood its true power. The pen was no longer just Raymond's gift. It had become the instrument of my signature, the tool that had transferred institutional control from the company's founder to its most loyal guardian. Adrian froze mid-sentence, his eyes widening with something approaching panic. The corporate mask cracked, revealing the younger man beneath uncertain, scrambling for control he no longer possessed. This has to be some mistake," he stammered, clutching the SEC notification printout like a life preserver. His voice wavered. No longer the booming cadence of assumed authority, but the brittle tone of a man watching his empire crumble in real time. I didn't speak. Not yet. Instead, I stood perfectly still, letting silence work as my advance guard. My gaze locked on Adrian's, unblinking, calm as winter morning, while around us directors shifted uncomfortably, waiting for the storm they could sense building. Adrian tried again, louder this time, forcing false confidence into words that trembled at the edges. "The SEC filing has to be an error. Ward was terminated. He has no legal standing in this company." But the tremor in his voice betrayed him completely. Still, I said nothing. I let the weight of my presence press into that room, a pressure that grew heavier with each passing second. Directors leaned back in their chairs, some glancing between us, others studying the mahogany table as if it held answers. They could feel it, the fundamental shift in power that had occurred not through shouting or dramatic gestures, but through legal documents signed in silver ink. Finally, I took one deliberate step forward. The Mont Blanc gleamed again in the light. I didn't raise it threateningly or gesture with it for emphasis. I simply held it steady, the way a man holds truth that no one else can deny. I stopped precisely halfway to the empty chair marked majority shareholder. I didn't sit, not yet. Instead, I stood beside it, silent, my eyes never leaving Adrian's increasingly pale face. The effect was immediate and devastating. His face drained of color and his words collapsed into nervous muttering as he gripped the table edge like a man afraid of falling. But the room had already turned. Every eye was on me now, waiting not for his explanations, but for mine. And still I waited. I let the silence stretch until it became unbearable, until even the sound of someone clearing their throat felt deafening. The anticipation became a weapon, and I wielded it with surgical precision. In that suspended moment, Adrian realized the fundamental truth about institutional power. It wasn't in grand speeches or aggressive presentations. Power rested with the one person calm enough to let silence do the work. At last, I lowered myself into the chair reserved for the majority shareholder. The leather creaked softly beneath me, but that sound carried through the boardroom like a gavel striking the final judgment. Every eye followed me as if the simple act of sitting was itself a declaration of institutional war. I placed the manila envelope, the same one Adrian had once pushed across this very table, directly in front of me, its edges worn from my grip over the past 3 days. Then, with a voice calm but cutting enough to slice through 25 years of accumulated grievances, I broke the silence. I do not accept the decision to terminate my employment. The words were steady, measured, each syllable striking harder than any raised voice could have managed. Adrian lurched forward, color rising in his cheeks like a man whose oxygen had been cut off. "This is outrageous," he barked. "He has no authority here. He was dismissed under my direct orders." "Your authority?" I interrupted gently, letting the words hang in the air like frost on morning windows. "That authority ends where ownership begins." The room tensed. Directors exchanged glances, torn between institutional habit and the seismic shift occurring before their eyes. Adrian pounded the mahogany table, desperation replacing arrogance. "The board has no obligation to recognize this. You're undermining everything we've built here." Before he could continue, Thaddeus Morrison, the most senior director, a man who'd remained silent throughout the morning's presentation, leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. His voice carried the weight of institutional memory. "For the record, I vote with Sebastian." The effect was immediate and conclusive. Another director nodded, Clifton Hayes from the audit committee. Then another, Bradley Rothschild from strategic planning. The dominoes fell not with fanfare, but with the quiet certainty of people recognizing that the storm had passed and they no longer needed to seek shelter with the wrong leader. Adrian's face drained of its manufactured confidence. He looked around desperately, eyes searching for allies who would no longer meet his gaze. I reached into my jacket and withdrew the Mont Blanc, its sterling surface catching the light like captured lightning. Slowly, deliberately, I placed it on the mahogany table where everyone could see it. "This pen," I said softly, my voice carrying to every corner of the room, "was given to me by Raymond Coyle when I signed the ownership transfer documents. It represents trust, continuity, and the founder's vision for this company's future." I leaned forward, sliding a document across the table with smooth authority. "It represents the institutional memory that doesn't die simply because one man dismisses 25 years of loyalty as dinosaur thinking." I signed my name with deliberate strokes, the pen scratching against paper like the sound of justice being written into the corporate record. The sound was soft, but in that boardroom it resonated louder than any shareholder revolt. For the first time in days, I felt the weight in my chest lift completely. Liberation came not through revenge or public humiliation, but through the quiet satisfaction of institutional balance being restored. I hadn't just defended myself. I had reclaimed what was rightfully mine, not through aggression, but through legitimate ownership and the respect it commanded. Adrian sank back into his chair, defeated. The board no longer looked at him with deference or fear. Their eyes were on me, waiting for leadership they could trust. The room held its breath as I finished signing the document. The Mont Blanc rested in my hand for a moment longer before I set it down with finality. Then I looked directly at Adrian, who sat cornered and pale at the other end of the table that no longer belonged to him. "From this moment forward," I said with quiet authority, "you will report directly to me." A ripple of acknowledgement spread through the boardroom. Some directors sat straighter, others exhaled with visible relief. The institutional tension that had pressed down on everyone for weeks finally broke. Thaddeus Morrison began to clap not thunderous applause, but the steady rhythm of a man grateful to see corporate justice restored. Others joined, Clifton Hayes, Bradley Rothschild, Winston Fairfax, their applause speaking not of victory celebration, but of institutional order being returned to its proper foundation. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he no longer protested. The weight of silence around him made clear that his corporate revolution was finished. I picked up the Mont Blanc again, holding it between my fingers as light glinted off its engraved surface. A small smile touched the corners of my mouth. "This company doesn't need disruptors," I said quietly, letting the words settle into the mahogany and leather around us. "It needs guardians." The board nodded, the meaning sinking into their institutional memory. For them, it was resolution. For me, it was restoration, not loud or vengeful, but steady, undeniable, and just. As I gathered the ownership documents, the pen slid easily back into my jacket pocket, right where it belonged. Liberation wasn't about erasing the past 3 weeks of humiliation. It was about proving that institutional loyalty still mattered, that sacrifice wasn't outdated thinking, and that integrity could outlast quarterly earnings pressure. For the first time in years, I walked out of that boardroom not as an employee subject to corporate whim, not as a scapegoat for someone else's ambition, but as the rightful steward of everything I had helped build over 25 years of unwavering commitment. And the look on Adrian's face, that hollow recognition of complete defeat, was more satisfying than any speech I could have delivered. Sometimes justice doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It arrives quietly, carried by steady hands and institutional memory, signed with silver ink that doesn't fade with the next quarterly report. Thank you for staying with this story of institutional justice. What did you think of Sebastian's quiet victory? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how this resonated with you. If you believe loyalty and integrity still matter in today's corporate world, like and subscribe. Sometimes the old guard knows exactly what they're protecting.
I'm freezing. I'm bleeding. Slowly fading away. But don't worry. I'm fine. The cold has settled in my heartbeat, like winter living in my veins. Every breath feels numb and fragile. Every smile just hides the pain. I'm breaking quietly in silence, falling slow without a sound. Yet I keep saying I'm okay, while my world burns to the ground. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry. I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. Maybe pain just learned to live here. Maybe sorrow feels like home. So I wear my wounds like armor and survive them all alone. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry. I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. If you ever see me smiling, no, it's just my last defense. 'Cause sometimes love means hiding how much you're suffering. No, I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry. I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. It's okay. Some days feel off, like I'm standing but still falling. A little pain, a little tired, and no one to tell it all to. There are days that feel unsteady, like I'm drifting out of place. Every step just feels so heavy, with a smile I have to fake. A little hurt I keep inside me, a little weight I always hide, and 1,000 quiet worries I've been holding deep inside. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I keep walking through the silence like it's all I've ever known. Every crowded room reminds me how it feels to be alone. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. Maybe one day I'll be stronger, maybe I'll learn how to speak, but for now I keep it buried in the parts of me too weak. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you.